This is Stephen Ramsden joining you again this week for This Week in Birding and Nature Photography on the Sunlit Earth Facebook page. And I've got a new face this week. Sherry McCarver's with us, who I've been birding with before, and she's awesome. She's going to join us. And Connie is with us. And thank you for being known people who are not playing porn on our meeting. I appreciate that. It's a long story, but this week we are going to have a good time and talk about how to use Topaz Labs in our processing. And it's going to be just a quick overview. I know that I know Alexander already knows how to do this, and so does Buddy Harrell, who will be checking on. But we're just going to go over it and look at a few cool things. Next week we're still open for a guest, but 2 weeks from now we'll have Ray Hennessy, who's a wonderful photographer from the Midwest, and he's going to be joining us live on the show, and he will be super cool. And then 2 weeks after that, we have Patty Kapmeyer, who has another name that I can't pronounce very well, but she's also a great photographer. And I'm going to get Alexandra, Sherry, if you don't know Alexandra, she's joining us from the UK, and she is a good friend of mine from the solar astronomy world. And she is going to come up with a guest for us for a coming up future show. She doesn't know this yet. You're muted still.
I know a very good person, and I asked him last week, but he's not come back and replied.
Okay, well, we'll put the pressure on because we want a UK birder on here. And,
well, no, he's from Spain.
That's even better.
Spanish birds. Very
good. So we're looking forward to that. Alexander's going to come up with an international guest. We've had a couple of internationals, and it's worked very well, including Alexander. And we've had the Dominican Republic on here a couple of times, and they have been awesome. So Barbara Graham, I know her. Okay, I don't think Barbara Graham is going to come on with any porn. Hey, Barbara. I hope. If I don't know the person's name or they didn't post in the comment section on our Facebook page, then we just can't let him in because we've had so many horrible hacking incidents on Zoom that I'm trying to find a good median in between letting, is that Barbara? There's Barbara, I think. Okay, you look legit. Very good. All right, and Barbara and I have been birding before also. She's a local one. And I'm trying to find a happy median here between allowing anybody who wants to join to come in and join, but also trying to keep all the tricksters off who are putting forth stuff we don't want to see. So let's talk about some of the highlights this week that I've seen on the Sunlit Earth Facebook page. And I'm going to share a few photos with you. I'm going to share this one first before I forget the name of it. This is from the Dominican Republic. My friend Raphael posted this. This is called a Scaly Mumia. Hiram Villarreal entered the waiting room, and I don't know who that is, and they have not posted. Let me see if he's a member. Hiram, yeah, I don't know that name, so he's not getting in unless he wants to post on the Facebook page. No. All right, so we're already getting hacked. How about that? All right, so I'm trying to get back to this. Zoom makes me do 50,000 things. Anyway, the Scaly Mumia from the Dominican Republic. Also, I thought this photo was really awesome that David Ramage posted right here. And that's two great blue herons in some sort of mating ritual, maybe passing some food. I don't think they're passing food, but you know, they look like a heart. So, I mean, who could not love that? But this is the time of year when all these wading birds are cozying up to each other instead of killing each other. And they're gonna make some eggs and have some babies in February, March. So this is a really cool image. And I really like the vertical feathers on either the male or the female. I guess that's the male. But what a great photo. You know, look at the background bokeh and the depth of field and all. Just excellent work and good processing by David Ramage. So let's share this other photo that we saw. And this is our old buddy, the orange crown warbler from Betsy Arrington, who's a sponsored photographer down in Savannah. And thanks to you donors, yeah, that's all of you. Betsy received a full frame Canon camera a few weeks ago from Sunlit Earth. She also was picked as one of the top 100 photographers by the National Audubon Society, yada, yada. But she has really pushed up her quality to the next level with the full frame camera, like I told her she would. Of course, nobody believes you until they get one in their hands, and then they realize it right off the bat. And Buddy Harrell and anybody else doing photography will tell you the same thing. There's 3 big steps in your photography. Going from shooting in JPEG to shooting in RAW is a humongous quality increase. Going from a zoom lens to a prime focus lens generally is another enormous increase in quality. And then going from a crop sensor to a full frame sensor is another gigantic increase in quality. And the latter of those, the 2 latter ones cost a ton of money, so everybody can't do them right away. But the first one is free, JPEG to RAW. And we're going to talk a little bit about that in a few minutes. And that is a major, major increase in anyone's photography quality. And I know everybody's got their reasons why they don't want to do it sometimes, but you know, nobody I know who's actually went from shooting a JPEG to shooting in RAW has ever went back to shooting a JPEG. So this last one we saw from another sponsored photographer on Sunlit Earth, our good friend Josiah Patrick, who is our good friend, but you know, he's never come on one of our shows with us, and I'm not really happy about that. But this is a little ruby crown kinglet, and these little boogers are all over the place right now this time of the year. It's very difficult to get the ruby crown. Are you guys seeing a ruby crown kinglet on your screen? Okay. Very difficult to get the ruby crown in the photo. And I'll give you a little secret. The ones you see with the crown all splayed out and on display is usually from somebody playing a call to get them agitated, which is okay. You know, if you want to do that, I don't do it too much, but I have been known to call a few birds in my day. But generally, if you see one that's all agitated looking and leaning forward with the crown out, it's because the birder has been playing a call to get them over there. So this is the normal photo you see of a ruby crown. And Josiah is using a 12-year-old Canon camera that we gave him through Sunlit Earth, and a couple of lenses that we gave him through Sunlit Earth. And he's come a long way in his first year. And we're going to try to get him on the show as well. A lot of you have already met Josiah out in the woods. Believe it or not, he's super shy in front of a camera. You would never guess that from meeting him in person, but we're going to get him on. Let me go to our next deal. Okay, and here I am. And yes, I am trying to grow my hair out, but it's not really cooperating. I'm thinking about turning it into maybe just spikes, because, you know, nothing will grow up here. So I'm gonna have to talk to Alexander about that to send me out some goodies to grow my hair. Alexander is a medical researcher. And Alexander, have they got the research down to give me a full head of hair like Richard Gere?
No.
Oh man, I was expecting a longer answer on that one. But, Alexander is a medical researcher. Very good. All right. Alexander, have they got the research down? Okay, so somebody's echoing through.
Yes.
Okay, so let's talk about Topaz Labs, just with a head shake. Yes, who is currently already using Topaz products? Okay, everyone except Connie and Alexandra. Alexandra, Topaz is also really good for solar imaging, I've found. Of course, you and I, especially yours, our solar imaging is already pretty good. But I'm always looking for some way to accentuate it a little bit. And I have used it. You know how you get a little bit of, well, you get a lot of noise around the chromospheric edge between the prominences and the disc when you do the composite, and you get a lot of noise if you bring the prominences up. It completely removes that noise and gives you a really dark, distinct background.
I use Neat Image. So it'll be very interesting to compare what I use, you know, in the Neat Image and seeing what you do with Topaz.
Cool. Is that a denoising program?
Yeah. It's like a Photoshop plugin.
Okay, well, maybe I need to try that one too, because I'm always looking for new stuff. Topaz Labs, here we go. I'm going to go to their website. And I know all of you already have this, but some of the viewers would probably want some information. My dog is barking at somebody. My dog's always barking at somebody. Okay, so we're sharing. Are we sharing? No, we're not. Let me share. Okay, so are you seeing my desktop now? Okay, topazlabs.com. Topaz is an independent company, not Adobe or anybody else. And they sell several products for accentuating your photography experience. I own all of them now. Buddy talked me into buying Denoise, then I got carried away and did all of them. And if you want a more in-depth on this, Buddy Harold did a great show about 4 or 5 shows ago, and it's on our YouTube channel. You can watch after this one. This is going to be a very simple one. So, excuse me. Denoise Ai is what we're going to be using. And these look like they might be expensive, but after using Denoise once, you're going to think that's the deal of the century. I use Sharpen, Denoise. Well, actually, I have them all, but you know, some of them aren't really all that great for what I'm doing. The one gigapixel that will enlarge your photos, that's pretty much already available in Photoshop. The video enhanced software works great, except it takes it took 2.5 days to enhance one of my videos, and you know, I've got a 10-year-old Mac Pro. That might be the reason, but I don't have 2.5 days to wait for an enhanced video. Mask AI is really cool, although you know, I already know how to use the mask function pretty good, but Mask AI is really cool for making masks in Photoshop if you are not good at that. Adjust AI is a great little program if you don't want to bother spending any time processing anything and you just want some pre-stored processing. Adjust AI is really cool for that. Jpeg to RAW supposedly turns your crappy Jpeg artifact image into a RAW image that you can reprocess. I've had no luck with that. The old phrase from my computer programming days, garbage in, garbage out, comes to play. You can use it, you know, if you want to. It is slightly better than the JPEG to begin with, but I haven't had a whole lot of luck with that. Topaz Studio 2 is a program that kind of incorporates several of these together into one program. It's pretty cool. I like it. And Buddy's show used Topaz Studio a lot in different layers. Like you get the bird the way you want it, and you want to do something cool to the background without doing it to the bird, then you would use a couple of different layers. And Topaz Studio is real handy to make your background layer look different than your bird or your foreground, or vice versa. So Topaz Studio 2 is pretty cool. What we're going to use today is Denoise. And all of these work on Mac or PC. And you download it. You can just do a trial if you want. You download it, install it, and it becomes a filter inside of Photoshop that you can access from the Photoshop filter menu. Or you can run any of these programs by themselves and just do that feature to that image and look at it. You don't have to run it inside Photoshop. So that's where you get it, topazlabs.com. And let's look at some of the photos. I went out this morning here in Atlanta, and yes, it was freezing, and maybe not freezing for the UK, but pretty cold here. It was 1 degree Celsius, and yeah, and also sleeting. Ice pellets were falling on me. 2 people entered the waiting room. Let me see who these 2 people are. Oh, there's Connie and Steve Rushing. I know both of them. Okay, good. If you're in a hurry, and you haven't been on our show yet, I talk a lot. So we'll get to it in just a minute. There's my buddy Steve Rushing, and there's Connie back with us. Awesome. And we are going to open up some images that I got this morning. I went out and took pictures of salamanders and some birds. And then the kids started showing up at the nature preserve with their mommies and screaming and yelling. And so I had to get out of there before I lost my mind. So we're going to look at some pictures of stuff I got this morning. So stand by while I get all this ready. I'm just going to share my screen. That'll probably work best. All righty. At least that's my goal, to share my screen. Share screen. Okay. Now, are you seeing my screen with a bittern on it holding a crawdad, a mud puppy, a crayfish, whatever you want to call them in your neck of the woods? And anybody that wants to say anything, jump right in. So what we have here is a collection of raw files, CR3 on my camera. It could be, if you're using a Nikon, it could be NEF files, could be DNG files, any kind of raw file is fine. And I just highlight all of my raw files, take them down here and drag them and drop them on top of Photoshop. And this is how my process goes. These are raw files from my Canon 1DX Mark III. And Photoshop opens Adobe Raw Importer, which is the same exact interface that you would use if you're using Lightroom or Photoshop or any other Adobe program. If you drop a raw file into any Adobe program, it opens Adobe Raw, which is what this is. Okay, so there's some images of the salamander. Let's see if we can find a good one to work on. Yeah, this is a pretty representative image here, let's say, of the salamander. And I zoom in on him and you can see the closer in I get, the noisier the image is, the noise becomes apparent. And I don't use any denoise on my camera. That's a no-no for serious photography. So we'll try this image. The first thing I like to do is crop my image using the crop tool in the Adobe Raw Importer. Then I just draw a box around it the way I want it to be. Okay, and it gives you a little preview of what it's going to look like, and I can move it around some and crop it any way I want. I like to use the rule of thirds when I'm cropping, and this would probably be a good place to do that. And when you like the way it looks, you just hit the return key and there's your cropped image. Okay, now let's open this in Photoshop. Open image. And hopefully my 12-year-old Mac Pro, there, see, it's faster than my new Mac. There we go. So here we are in this image in Photoshop, and you want to start working on it using Topaz. You go to the filter menu in Photoshop, and if you installed it correctly, Topaz Labs should have an entry in your filter menus, and you choose Topaz Denoise, and then hopefully it starts. Okay, it's starting. And it starts on top of Photoshop. And if something's wrong with the display or the audio, if somebody would just jump in and start yelling at me, I'd appreciate it, because I can't tell if it's going out correctly or not. All right, so it's generating a preview, and I'll try to make this screen bigger if I can. There we go. It's generating a preview, and I have a slightly older computer, so my previews will take a little bit longer than yours would. And if you notice, it's a very, very simple interface. It shows you the name of the file down here and what you're doing to it. Over on the right, it gives you a box that you can move around to preview just a certain portion of the file. And you can make that box larger or smaller with the zoom function here, or you can scale it to fit, which will take forever to preview. But here's a preview of the image after I've applied these settings. Your options are remove noise and enhance sharpness in this particular setting. There's 3 types of denoising you can do. Denoise Ai, artificial intelligence, they call it. All clear, which is a different algorithm for denoising, which will give you a slightly different result. I don't know why they call it all clear. And low light, which works surprisingly really good in low light. So if you're taking a picture at a really high ISO at sunset or something, the low light setting seems to detect that noise better. And what what this computer is doing is when you, let me stop share for just a minute. When you have an image on a DSLR or any camera, what it is an array of numbers. And every pixel on your camera produces a level for each RGB, red, green, and blue color, and also a level for the brightness overall. That's called luminance. And these numbers are recorded in a spreadsheet array. Okay, and that's what your image actually is to the computer. These sorts of mathematical constructs in these programs understand and learn what noise looks like numerically in these arrays. And that's through billions of samplings of different photos and what, what noise is. Whenever you adjust anything on a photo in Photoshop, you're actually changing the numerical value in these arrays. Like high contrast, you might have a bunch of 7s and 6s, let's say, in this numerical array. If you want to make higher contrast in there, the computer will turn it into 8s and 4s, which gives you a bigger difference right there on the border, and it gives you more contrast. So it's all done mathematically. And when you're using the computer to detect noise, it looks at that whole array of your image, and it identifies areas that it thinks are noise based on what the predominant values are in the image for the real image, the signal. And then it sees these aberrations that it identifies as noise. And then this noise reduction is a mathematical formula applied to that array of numbers that produces a less noisy image. And that's probably way more than you ever wanted to know, but that's how denoising and any other Photoshop type effect works on an image. So there's some denoise. Let's go back to Denoise Ai and remove a little bit more noise in my experience. And this is a very, very close up. This is already cropped to about 1/5 of the frame. And this preview is about 1/20th of the frame. So you're zoomed in really tight on it. And let's see what that does. I know it's not as easy to see it over the internet. Wow, that is an enormous difference. So I'm going to apply that to my image. And once you got it the way you like it, you just click the apply button, and Topaz Denoise does the rest and takes the image back over into Photoshop. Okay, so far we've opened a raw image directly from the camera. I cropped it down a little bit. I have applied, I opened that in Photoshop from the Adobe Raw Importer, and I have now applied Topaz Denoise. And we're waiting for it to get done. It's at 56, 57%. It'll be done in just a second. And when it's done, the Topaz Denoise program disappears. The window goes away, and it takes you right back to Photoshop. And this is where it's going to get cool. If you have Photoshop 2021, or if you have the new subscription Photoshop that most of you, I think, already have, they've added a filter in there in the last 2 versions where you can just go right to the camera raw filter. Okay, now we're back in Photoshop. And I don't know if it transferred on the internet or not, but the difference in this photo between what came off my $6,500 camera, which already provides a fantastic noise-free image, to what it looks like now is like night and day, man. So let me zoom in a little bit. All right, I'm zoomed in. This is 1/20th of the frame, and there is not a single speck of anything that looks like noise anywhere in this image. And that's 1/20th, 1/25th of the frame. So that's an incredible zoom capability. I'm going to go back out a little bit. In fact, now that it's so noise free, I'm going to even crop it some more. So let's just crop it ridiculously small to this.
So Stephen, what was the original ISO on this?
The original ISO was 6400.
Okay.
And it was a 1/250th second exposure at ISO 6400, which is high even for my camera. I mean, it was noisy. And I hate that it doesn't process that well over Zoom, but we're at the mercy of the internet. I could probably pull up the original RAW though and show it. But anyway, so it's not the greatest image in the world. It's not totally in focus, but this is a handheld macro lens with me kneeling in mud in freezing temperatures with sleet dropping on my head. So you're getting what you're paying for. All right, so now under the filter menu, you can go and choose camera raw filter right from the Photoshop filter menu. And this is great because this brings back up the Adobe Raw window. So you can edit any image in any format as if you were importing it as a raw file. I hope I'm sharing the screen. Yes, I am. All right, so we're back to what looks exactly like the Adobe Raw importer window, but it's not working on the raw, it's working on this image. So our general things we can do in here, everybody's got their own taste. I'm just gonna tweak it a little bit, make it look like I would make it look. I'm gonna I reduced the ollie exposure a little bit. I'm adding in a little bit of contrast. I like to bring down my highlights sometimes, not that much. Texture is a really cool feature in Adobe Raw Importer. However, it doesn't even come close to Topaz Sharpen, which we're going to use in just a second. So if you don't have the Topaz programs, you can just tweak the texture. I'll show you what it looks like. It brings out all sorts of sharpness, but it's not as good as Topaz Sharpen. Now, clarity has different effects on different images. Boy, it really makes this one look good. So I'm going to put a little clarity there. Dehaze is my favorite in the Adobe Raw Importer because my camera tends to be a little bright. Dehaze really makes the image look good. Now, saturation, something I like to put in the wintertime, especially because everything is dull and gray. But you can go way too far with saturation like that. And then everybody goes, oh, nice image. And then they just kind of move along. You don't want to go too far with any of these things. And when we started out doing astrophotography, all of us, you always could tell the guy who just got the solar scope and the camera because it was so sharp, man. It was like, you know, ice picks everywhere on the sun. It was like a mountain range or something, super, super sharp. And I used to say at my lectures and still do, you know, there's not a single piece of solid anything on the sun. There's no sharp edges anywhere on the sun. So, you know, back off the sharpening about 50%. All right. So there's a finished image, and this took me about a total of 15 seconds of time plus a minute of Topaz. So I would save this image now as whatever. And, you know, there's a million more things you can do to this image, but we went from a really noisy raw that looked not that great to a finished image that looks really good and really highlights the details on the salamander's body. This is a southern redback salamander, and there's his little feet and pawpaws, and it was just a cute little thing. And I picked him up and had him in my hand for a little while, and it was funny because it was so cold outside. The salamander was basically lifeless. You know, they hibernate when it gets that cold. They don't go into hibernation, but they just stop moving. And when you put them on your hand, if you do, they warm up in about 30 seconds and they start squiggling around and start moving around. So it's a cool thing to handle salamanders. And if none of you have done that, you should really go out and do it. This is the best time of the year in our latitudes to play with salamanders and find them. And the way you find them is you go out and look for a log that's dead or something, and a piece of wood laying on the ground. And it's got to be close to water, but not in the water. And if the log's been there for a while, you just kind of slowly roll it over a little bit. And when you roll it over, underneath the log will be some salamanders and some worms and some bugs and some millipedes. And the salamanders kind of sit down there and wait, and they eat all the stuff that's underneath the log. So that was a very quick use of Topaz Denoise. Now let's do Topaz Sharpen real quick on here. I know this isn't the most exciting topic to watch someone else do, but I just want you to see how easy this is to use. Topaz Sharpen works the same way. It comes up as a standalone program. And I'm gonna set it so we can see before and after. Wow. All right. So let's just tweak the sharpness hysterically high on here. You know, and like I say, one of the cool things about this, let me share the screen. I forgot to do that, didn't I? There it is. We've got up Topaz Sharpen. On the left is the original. On the right is the sharpened. And one of the cool things about all these Topaz programs is there's almost no options over here. It's very, very simple to use. It's, you know, the options in sharpness are sharpness, noise suppression. The options in denoise are denoise and sharpen. So there's not 1,600 things you have to learn. So let me crank up the sharpness so that it's really noticeable. You know, I'm trying to crank it up to a point where it starts looking terrible, but it just doesn't look terrible. It still looks great. So let me apply that. And that's going a little bit faster. And when you get done applying it, it goes back to your original image. And the sharpen from Topaz also sort of helps with your focus. I've noticed that it makes, if you don't have a great focus, it really kind of helps the focus all around as well. And one of the tabs in Topaz Sharpen is actually called focus. That's designed to correct when you have not the best, focus. In this case, the depth of field with this 100mm macro lens is so thin. I was only about 5 inches from this salamander. I'd have to have it set on like f5000 to get the whole thing in focus at this range. So it actually kind of corrected some of the focus here. So let's go in close and look at the head of this thing. And still, I mean, I don't even know. This is maybe 1/50th of the frame. And there is no noise or over sharpening of any kind visible on this image after running it through Denoise and Sharpen. And that's, the actual focus point is right there between the two legs of the salamander. And that's really absolutely amazing for graphic processing. So let me save this image as something.
Stephen, I've found that over sharpening occurs if you ever use the stabilize tab.
Let's go back and we'll show them what you're talking about.
Stabilize tends to over sharpen as far as I'm concerned.
I would have to agree with you, and that's a good point. Buddy Harrell is the expert on this, and he taught me how to use it.
And stabilize will give you a lot of artifacts right around the edges. So it over sharpens and creates its own detail that's not
right. Artifacts, we call it, just like you said. So what we're referring to is there's 3 tabs in Topaz, and this is for the viewers that aren't already using Topaz. There's 3 modes of sharpening: sharpen, stabilize, and focus. And just for fun, we'll go through and do the focus one and see what it looks like, if it'll give me a preview. Yeah, my poor decrepit 12-year-old Mac Pro has only got 128 gigs of RAM and a 46 terabyte hard drive, so it's really struggling. I'm kidding. This thing will blow away any PC on the market still.
even while it's doing that. Stabilize is attempting to try to get rid of motion blur, I think was the intent.
Right.
So it's trying to measure the distance that the pixels might have moved because of motion blur. And so that's a hard calculation to make anyway. And so I totally agree with Buddy that it tends to overdo it.
Yeah, for sure. And these 3 tabs are just 3 different mathematical approaches to that array of numbers. And the motion blur is attacked with the stabilize because somebody's sat down and looked at millions of photographs or some computer and determined what a motion blur looks like in an array of numbers on your CCD or your CMOS chip. And that's what it's going for. So that's focus method. Let's go to stabilize and we'll show you. Of course, it has its place also. And let's see what kind of artifacts it has done. And I like this one feature here under sharpness. Yeah, see, it's way more. It's way worse in stabilize. I'll show you in just a second. But it has noise suppression, and then it has a button underneath that says extra noise suppression. I think that's kind of funny. So I'm hoping that one of the developers was just kind of laughing when they did that. So it's got a slide rule for noise suppression, and then a button that says extra noise suppression. It's kind of like that Spinal Tap movie where the amps, the Marshall amps they're using go to 11 instead of 10. And that's how much better they are for some reason. These go to 11. Okay, so we're going back to the screen in just a second, 90%. Okay, now, yeah, with stabilize, you can see in here how pixelated the sharpen was. And look at these colors that are being introduced over here. These blues don't exist in the image. So yeah, stabilize did not do as good a job as focus did. Here, I'll zoom in a little bit more. Okay. Yeah, these colors were not in the original image, and you can see it's super pixelated. So let's go back to undo. See the difference? Yeah. And that's just 2 different modes of treatment. I'll redo it again. really crappy for this particular image, but I'm sure it has its uses. I just haven't found them yet. Yep. All right. So while I find another image, does anyone have any comments or anything? I'm going to look for another image real quick. Here. All right. So let's pick another cool image out of here to see if we can. You know, I wish that my computer had a preview for the raw image, because when I'm looking on the file folder, I can't just thumb through them and get a preview of the CR3, because the files are so large on this DSLR that it just doesn't preview.
Do you always do the denoise first, then the sharpen, or can you do the sharpen then the denoise?
Yeah, I tried that, and it works better to do the sharpen and then the denoise on the solar photos. Excellent point.
I do it the opposite way on bird photos and that kind of thing, Steve, because I found that if you sharpen it first, what you're doing is sharpening the noise that's in there. So I like to denoise first. I mean, maybe that's just a personal preference.
Yeah, well, on my nature photos, I would always do that as well.
Yeah.
But for some reason on these, maybe it's because we use different type of camera for solar astronomy. Also, we're using a single wavelength, so the noise isn't as, you know, I don't know, man. But I've tried it a million different ways, and we have a lot of weird stuff we do on solar photos. Like we do something called iterative sharpening, where you sharpen like a tiny bit that's not even noticeable. But if you do that 10 times in a row, it looks a million times better than if you do a 10% sharpening all at once. And don't ask me why. But Alexander and I, Mark Townley, and all these nerds on the solar forum have worked diligently to figure these things out. So let me share this again. And the first person that can tell me what this is wins a prize. Here we go. There. What is that?
Rotten teeth.
You win. This is the upper mandible of a deer that has been in the nature preserve for about 8 months. It stumbled in off the road after it got hit by a car, and you know, it's not the most pleasant photograph, but it's really a fascinating photograph. And I don't even like, you know, looking at dead stuff or like that, but I've been watching this deer. It's a buck. I've been watching it deteriorate over several months in the woods. And it's just been amazing how these organisms have just picked it clean. And there's nothing left now except white, clean bones. And these are the teeth of this deer. So I can tell by Alexander's face that maybe I should pick a different image, and I will. Okay, here's the lower mandible of the deer. Is that any better? That's the same lower mandible. And, you know, I don't know what this is, whether that decay was on the teeth already or whether that's something that's happened since. But it was just really cool. And this thing stunk about 4 months ago. It was horrible. I don't know if you recall, but I put some pictures online about, we wanted to get the antlers off this deer because it was an 8-point buck. And I went in and I thought, oh, I'll just go in and cut them off with a hacksaw, man. I'm cool. I'm a man. I can do it. And I was just about in tears about halfway through because I just felt horrible out here, you know, hacksawing this poor deer's antlers off. I really felt terrible about myself for many days afterwards. But this would be a good picture. This is a stump that's at the Clyde Shepherd Nature Preserve, and it's just before you get to the feeders on the left. And this picture has got all kind of problems now, and I purposely took it this way. It's overexposed, obviously. It's got a ton of noise in it. Let's go in here and look. This is ISO 3200 at f5 and 1/60th of a second. But it's got a ton of noise. Maybe I even have a higher ISO one. Hold on. Nope, that's it. So we're going to make this image look good. And we're going to do it quickly in Topaz Denoise, and then we're going to spend the rest of our time visiting and talking with each other. All right, so here we go. I'm in the raw importer. I'm not even going to touch it in the raw importer. I'm just going to open it in Photoshop. So open image. And I'll make my screen big. All right. And I'll try to make this big. I know it's difficult to see on these Zoom meetings. All right, so you can barely tell what this is because everything's so overexposed. But let's go to filter, denoise. And I'm just gonna say accept on a medium remove noise and a little bit lower enhanced sharpness. And then we'll let it do its thing. This is a little bit larger image, so it's gonna take a few seconds. Oh, you know, I'm not even sharing my screen, am I? Or am I? Are you seeing the screen? You are, okay, all right. It's so confusing when you're trying to run this. I'm just gonna take a moment here and tell everyone how absolutely thrilled I am that we have not been invaded yet by porn videos or anyone using foul language. Okay, back to the, don't get any ideas, Barbara Graham. All right. There we go. It's almost done. It's getting there. This will be an example of the reasons why you should be shooting in RAW and then converting to JPEG at home, because you saw how terrible this image looks. With me doing about 30 seconds of work, it's going to look like I shot it with perfect settings. And I'm like, you know, Nat Geo quality, man. I'm a professional photographer. And that's just from shooting in RAW instead of JPEG. And if you had shot this in JPEG, you would not be able to edit this image anywhere near as much as we're going to edit it in just a moment. So does anybody in here still shoot in JPEG? Don't be embarrassed. No? Okay, good. And in just a minute, I'm going to go around the room and ask everybody to talk about their favorite bird this week. So you might give that some thought. Sherry, I don't even know if I would recognize you because I've never seen you without, you know, 20 pounds of winter gear wrapped around you and cussing. We're almost done. The reason this one's taking longer to do is because this is the entire image. This has not been cropped at all. So this is a 60 megabit raw image. 99%, 100%. It's getting there. Okay, so we have denoise the image. Now I'm going to go directly into, and this is our raw image directly from the camera, way overexposed using horrible settings. And when you choose to shoot in RAW, it's pretty much just like you're still at the camera and you can adjust the settings like you were still on site and can take the picture again. If you had recorded this as a JPEG, there would be zero room to do any editing really. So let's go to the camera RAW filter and let's just turn the exposure down. Okay, it's already looking a billion times better. Let's hit contrast a little bit. Let's put in some shadow, increases the shadow some. Put a little saturation in there. Some dehaze. Okay, so I hope that you guys can see over the internet how that horrible looking photo, look at the difference. I mean, this is from a crappy photo on your camera, and had you recorded this in JPEG, this is pretty much what you'd be stuck with. But since you recorded it in RAW, with about 10 seconds of keystrokes, you can turn it into this image. And this is 10 seconds spent on this image. There's 50 other tools you can use to enhance this image and make it look better. And if you want, I'll do some of that. But this image took 10 seconds to go from RAW to a usable image. Okay, so let's go. Here's the undo. That's what we started with. And the redo. And this was just from 3 adjustments. So those of you that are watching online, shoot in RAW, man, and then go home and practice in JPEG.
Stephen,
So that's, yes.
I'm just intrigued, you know, if I had an image where it was too bright on the outside, when I reduce the exposure down, then inside of the log would go black. So how have you managed to keep the inside of the log not black, but the outside darkened?
Well, let's do it again and I'll show you. So I'm going to undo the changes I made. Okay. And then we're going to go to camera, raw, filter. And there's a million more complicated ways to do this, but this is all I did. I turned down the exposure. And as you see, the inside of the log did get a lot darker. And then I just chose the shadows, you know, and we're used to using shadow highlights on solar images, but there's a shadow slider on here and I just turned it up and that brings back the dark parts of the image. Okay. So there was a 10-second adjustment, man. And this is impossible with a JPEG image. I mean, you could do it, but you would introduce so much noise that it would just look terrible. But even super close up, look at that. There's not a bit of noise anywhere in this image because we took it all out with Topaz Denoise beforehand. Okay, and it doesn't get any simpler than this for editing an image in wildlife, but it's just such a huge plus to start with a raw file instead of a JPEG. And you know, you can talk to your blue in the face of somebody who's used to shooting a JPEG and they just won't do it. They just don't think it's worth their time to actually sit at home and open up a file on a computer. Well, you know, they just don't want to do it. So that's that. Now, and that's a beautiful stump, by the way. A huge family of chipmunks live in that stump, and they come over to the bird feeders every 15 minutes and eat me out of house and home. We've put in 3 20-pound bags last week. That's 60 pounds. How many kilos is that, Alexander? 32 of 38 of bird feed in the nature preserve. And they are eating me out of house and home over there. So Sherry McCarver, can you unmute and tell us a little bit about Sherry McCarver? Because we see your pictures on Sunlit Earth, not enough, hint, hint. But what is going on in your world?
Well, I am actually new to shooting in RAW, so that's why I'm excited to be learning a little bit more right now. Trying to make that conversion over.
And you're using Nikon, right? So you're shooting
Yes.
in NEF files, am I right?
Yep.
Okay.
That's
and
right.
you have a great camera and lens because I've seen it.
Well, thank you.
And your photos are already excellent, and you're not going to believe how much better photo you're going to get out of doing this.
Well, I'm looking forward to getting better at it. Like I said, I'm just at that learning curve stage right now, so just trying to learn all I can about that jump from JPEG to RAW.
Right. It is well worth your time. Now, are you using Photoshop, or you're using something else, or
Photoshop, and then using the Topaz filters and all of that.
Well, I'll kick this in there, and a lot of people use Lightroom, and a lot of people use Photoshop. Lightroom is a cataloging piece of software. It does most of the things it uses the same Adobe RAW importer that we just used in Photoshop, because all the programs do. Lightroom's forte is organizing photos and keeping them and keeping histories of edits. Okay, so if that's really important to you and you've got unlimited hard drive space, Lightroom is a great way to go. Photoshop doesn't care how you organize the files, and it is for editing the pictures, and then you got to do whatever you want with the files after that. And Photoshop has a little bit more elaborate editing capabilities. In fact, in Lightroom, when you're done with the Adobe RAW, one of the features or options is to open it in Photoshop and do some more to it. So that's the main differences there that I know of. I'm sure everyone has an opinion on it, but Topaz, Topaz only works as a filter inside of Photoshop, so not inside of Lightroom.
Right.
Steve Rushing has something to say.
Yeah, one of these days out there on the tower when we're just whiling away the hours,
I hope that's really soon.
I'll correct some of your misconceptions about Lightroom.
Please do.
It doesn't take any more. Matter of fact, it takes less file space, and it's more than just an organizer. I do all my processing. It uses ACR, so all the sliders that you showed that you use, I use the exact same ones.
Right.
What I can't do is do layering and some of the actual photoshopping pieces of it.
Yeah, and it does use exactly the same Adobe RAW importer, which are where all the sliders come from. and really maybe it's an advantage, maybe it's a disadvantage. It depends on how you look at it with the Lightroom, but it does spend a lot of time organizing the files, and it uses the Apple photo, like compressed library file, like the same one you would find in iPhoto, not the same file, but the same concept, where it takes all these pictures and compresses them into a big library file. And it's a great program.
No, it doesn't.
Okay. Well, we'll talk about that on the
advantage to using Lightroom.
What's that, buddy?
I can tell you one advantage to using Lightroom.
It's not hard drive space. Go ahead.
Let's say you take 12 shots of a bird, you know, with a 1DX Mark II. I mean, you can do that in a second, you know.
Right.
So if you take 12 photos, you can go into Lightroom and develop the first one with your exposure and shadows and whites and darks and all the other things, and then you can copy those. You can copy those settings from that first photo and then apply it to all of the others. So then you can figure out which one you really want to use and which one you want to save.
Yeah, that's true, and that's a feature in Adobe Raw Importer that you could do also
Okay.
Yeah, and that's a great feature. Rushing, I know you got something to say.
Well, you know, I've learned, I've not known you for real long, but long enough to know that we probably do need to be out there. I store my files in RAW just in the normal files on my PC. There's no compression and so forth. And then I have a Lightroom catalog, and all the catalog does is it keeps the edits. So it's lossy. So the RAW file never changes.
Okay, so it references the location of the raw file then in the catalog file.
And it's just in my normal, I use date as my basic file format. And then in Lightroom, I can put them in collections, but it doesn't put copies.
It just references the original file. Yeah, yeah.
And so it just stays the size of one raw file image in the normal PC files. And then
right. Well, you would have to say that Lightroom has got a lot of resources geared towards cataloging images for you.
It does do that, and I need that.
Yeah. And Photoshop doesn't have any resources towards that. And that's not an advantage or a disadvantage, just a difference between the two programs.
Yeah, I wish I, was actually even more disciplined about using some of the Lightroom functions like keywording and so forth. I've been doing some blogging recently, and I'll go, man, where's that picture of,
Right. And that's a problem with my storage technique too, because I can never find a photo. I remember taking it, but I've got 42 terabytes of images here and I'll never find a photo. It'd take me a lifetime.
I'm sure Buddy's probably a lot better than I am about it, watching this discipline. But, to be able to go through just quickly batch keyword or to tag all the locations as Clyde Shepherd. So if I want to go say, how many birds did I see? And get, all of that is right at your fingertips. But it's all indexed, right? The files themselves are still just over there hanging out in their normal file.
Well, I've noticed that people, when they learn to use a program and they get comfortable with it, all of a sudden that's the best program there is. And everybody else should do it the way we do it. And, our buddy Kevin is an expert at that. And if he knows how to use it, then that's the only way anybody else should do it. So I appreciate the input, and, we're all great friends here. So I love learning something that I don't know. And I would love to learn more about that I don't know, but I'm not just going to roll over and say, yeah, you're right. I'm going to challenge you on it, just like you're going to challenge me on it. So, and that's how we are.
Go down and get another porter, and I'll be back in a minute.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Sherry, are you a Lightroom user now or not?
I am not. I've been strictly Photoshop up to this point.
Well, we'll just see how it goes. But are you comfortable with the Adobe Raw Importer? That's like when you drag your RAW onto it, it opens up.
Right. Yeah.
Sliders. And was there anything in there that have you been using it for a while, or you just started?
Not long. No, just it's kind of a new thing for me, and so I am just still getting used to how does it compare and what do I do with all these little sliders and so forth, and just getting that little bit of fine detail worked out. I'm still learning that.
Yeah, it's got a lot of great features. Have you come across the adjustment brush yet?
No.
Oh boy, yes. Yes, it's going to be like your first date back in high school. It's a great tool. The adjustment brush allows you to paint on the image with a brush just certain portions, like the bird's eye, for instance. If you
Okay.
want to just highlight the eye and bring out that gleam from the sunlight, you just brush over the eye a little bit, and then all the changes you make only apply to that eye and leave everything
Okay.
else the same. And then you
Okay.
feather that change into the bird. Not that I would ever cheat on a bird image and do that and create a catch light where there wasn't one before. I mean, I would never do that. But if you wanted to do that, the adjustment brush will be your good friend.
Okay.
So the adjustment brush is one of the tools in there. It looks like a brush. So I will be happy to talk with you about that further. But I wanted to keep this super, super beginner for those that watch later. Barbara, are you using these programs currently? Are you trying to use these programs currently, or what are you doing? I don't think she heard me. Well, okay. Connie, what are you doing with your images? You're muted still. There you go.
I have not shot any pictures in probably 10 years. And in fact, my camera seems to have taken up residence at my son's house. I don't know if I can get it back. So I came today because I was trying to decide if I wanted to retrieve my camera and get into this again. I have only
You
used
do.
Photoshop. Oh, you've made that decision.
You
for me.
do, yes. And you want to go with me to Clyde Shepherd and talk about these and do it. Let me make that decision for you. Barbara, I'm going to get right back to you in just a second.
Yeah.
All right, Barbara, what are you using on your image flow now?
Are you talking to me?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. I am. I use
Lightroom.
I use Lightroom and Photoshop.
Right. And are you pretty comfortable with that? You can yes or no me if you want.
Yes.
Okay, cool. And do you prefer to bird with a camera in your hands, or do you prefer it with binoculars?
I was never. I have to tell you that I'm having an audio problem.
Yeah, I can see that. Yeah. Or I can hear that actually. So it's okay though. We can still make out what you're saying.
I was not a birder before. I don't think I can make this work.
Okay, well, that's no problem. I hope that you're enjoying our show though.
I am.
And that maybe
yeah.
you've picked up a couple of tips from Lightroom and Photoshop. And I've seen you out before, and you know, we can talk about this if you want any more information. We'll get with you and make that happen. And Alexandra, what was your favorite bird that you saw this week? Because you've got about a foot of snow on the ground, don't you?
Not anymore. It's all melted away, but it's still only about, I think it's going to get down to about -3 tonight.
Oh my goodness.
But I think the most special bird I had this week, it's not a very special bird, but I had a pheasant in the garden. Usually you see them out in the fields and things like that, but it actually hopped over the fence and came and ate from the bird food scattered on the floor. So I was quite pleased, but I haven't seen her since. So maybe
this is a wild pheasant that just happened into your garden.
Yeah, and I think I've probably only seen one, maybe once in the 20 years that we've been here.
Yeah, we don't get a lot of those in Atlanta.
No, so that was quite a special little visit. So I was quite pleased with that. Common bird, but special in the garden.
My friend in Florida that has a neighbor 3 doors down. He lives in Orlando, and he has a neighbor 3 doors down that raises pheasants, and he has like 4 pairs of pheasants, and he hates those birds. They are the loudest birds on earth, apparently, when they get sexy or when they get angry. I mean, they are absolutely horrible. And my friend Pete says they come and they'll jump up. They can't fly too far, but they'll jump up enough to get on top of his house and just start screaming. And that's all they do is scream, 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 scream. But
well, yeah, I noticed today I could hear some, like cock pheasants calling, you know, like in the local woodland, because it carries a long way because it's quite a loud call. So spring is obviously on the way.
When the weather gets a little bit warmer so that you can go out in your garden, I would really love it if you can find a way to maybe show us around, because I've seen pictures of it. I've never been to your place, but we've met in person in London before. But I think everybody would really enjoy seeing some of your garden, especially with some of the spring birds in it. So that's another promise I'm going to make you make for me. And so you owe us one guest and a tour of your garden in the spring. Okay. So unless anyone else has any more comments, I think that's a wrap for this week's show. We're at the 1 hour mark. And I appreciate everyone tuning in as usual. And Steve, whatever you're doing there with your new camera setup is a million times better than your previous appearances. So keep doing that. You look like a professor. So that's it for this week in birding and nature photography. And I will see some of you at the Nature Preserve very soon. And I will see all of you on the next week's show, hopefully. And that's it. And adios. And thank you for tuning in.